Yes, I was. Yeah, down here. Oh, about 20 minutes before starting. Yeah. I brought 3 ones.
They might be some of the early people that came that hadn't even registered and signed in. So.
Oh, I'm looking for a button. There's no button. I usually have a Joy Prom that I use.
So if you can actually remind your students to go and sign their names in on their sign-in sheet.
Okay.
We're just trying to keep track of it. We didn't have that sheet out for this meeting. Good, put your top time on there.
I think it's 320.
That sounds good. Just drag it onto the test.
I hope that's right. Dang it. I'm not used to it. Okay, let's try that again. There it is.
So when's the last time that you actually were doing Infinity stuff up for Northern Iowa?
Oh, well, what happened, I was starting to do that around 2001, and then I got this call from Hales Data Center, and encouraged me to apply for an NRC associateship, and so how can you say no to that? And so I wrote the grant, and I got the associateship, and I've been busy with projects through Eros ever since. I am going to talk about, I'd like to get something started again. Now that I'm writing one manuscript over one project that I did at Eros, and hoping to get that submitted here. Well, it's multi-author, who knows how that's going to go. I'd like to think in 2-3 months get that submitted. I've got another project I'm in the 3rd year, or actually I'm still in the 2nd year of a 3-year grant on an Idaho project, but I would like to get something going up there. Did you have something in mind?
Well, no, I mean, there's just a project that I've been working on up there.
Yeah.
My advisor is here as well, and I should introduce you to him because he is, he's not specifically a herpetologist or anything, but he's had a couple students, I guess, working on amphibians, and he is sort of interested in trying to continue my project.
And your project is
in
on?
the future. So I have a poster out there you can check out later.
Okay,
but,
because I remember it has with abnormalities.
No. I think I originally contacted you when I was thinking about that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that was sort of my original project, and then it switched. So now I actually ended up collaborating with the DNR because they've started this new wetland monitoring project just a couple of years ago, right when I was getting started. And so they're collecting all sorts of chemical and physical data on these wetlands.
Okay.
And they sort of started up in the Winnebago watershed around there.
Okay.
Yeah, is this my presentation here?
Yep.
After my talk, let's talk some.
Sure. Yeah.
Put our heads together.
Yeah, but I'm just finishing up my master's now, so I'll be graduating this summer sometime. But I think it's something my advisor just would like to sort of try to continue. And the DNR is really happy with having people help with the biological section.
Yeah.
They have all these funds from the EPA to like prevent water quality, but not do the biological side. So it's sort of working out pretty well because we couldn't afford to be testing besides this from our own funds. So,
Okay.
So there might be some potential for collaboration.
Sounds good. We'll talk some more later.
Yeah.
Before we start up.
Sure.
You mean for the Steve Meyer paper? That one? They did 2 independent things. They never actually disclosed. In that paper, they talk about bee richness and how that's declined, and they show that more other technologies
I'm just going to change
richness than
the title to the time.
And then in plants.
Yeah, just once you close it, we can just the name of the file.
Okay.
I'll just
I
check.
don't know.
All right.
That was a totally different thing.
So you close it?
Close it, yeah, and then
And
so then
unplug
you get
it.
here.
They,
Yeah.
And then they said we need change
Amanda's gonna be the leading the session
for
over here.
the species.
And she had a question about announcing the
Oh, yeah,
species
they
name
never
or something.
made it.
So she's also going to have little time cards that,
Okay, yeah.
to help you stay on time if you need to class. But then it's also going to
What
be
they
the
did
clock
there
is
is,
also
so
right
it's
there.
all
So at 5 minutes, I'll hold up to 5, and then
the
I'll
first
set
thing
up
we
the
do is meta.
Okay, the last 5 minutes are for questions.
Yeah, so
Usually,
yeah.
that's the ideal.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you go a little bit over, it's okay. But
Okay. Hopefully.
Is it Prioria
Prioria, yeah.
So they
Copay.
make those truly those effects. And so what I showed on that graph is that they actually plotted the effect size for each study.
That one's at 3 o'clock.
For the reproduction response to habitat fragmentation against the effect size for the pollination response to habitat fragmentation. And that's what was correlated to our value. So it's not fantastic, but it was pretty good. And I mean, the previous slides, you would have already expected that because you see that the patterns are similar. But this is just tighter because it's on it was neat that they did it because it was on the study by study.
Right, I guess that you're asking if it's
So those plants are the 50 plant species that have data both on reproduction.
now I know what it is.
So there were probably some, yeah, there were definitely some were self-compatible, some were self-compatible. And they didn't put the dots so that you didn't know that. That would actually be,
Until the it's sort of like I just
Yeah.
see the seed him. Not that I'm just
yeah.
yeah.
Required. I mean, because the thing is about the self-compatible, so they can do that. Yeah, they do. I don't recall them discussing it.
obviously there's several other things that cause it to decline.
Well, they did kind of show that they, in the meta-analysis itself, irregardless of the correlation of effect size, they did show that habitat fragmentation, I'm sorry, that pollination responds to habitat fragmentation. Yeah, but, I mean, yeah, it's pollination. And that's a good portion of the species that have plant reproduction. So, yeah.
Yeah, so they did address it. I thought that was perhaps a good way to say, well, if you just store them outside.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Then if you saw that correlation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't really clear on that.
No. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not. I just remember that. So those are different. Yeah, but I just wanted to. Are you? Yeah, I talked to a couple of other people who were in that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And then, well, you know, if you give us. Yeah, I'm gonna, I was actually going to discuss it with this room, so it's too. Because I was actually looking at it all and somehow. So I'm just like, oh, I can.
Well, I know.
I don't know. Yeah. It's okay, you can hold it. I saved all the work I've done to find something. I'm reading. Are you good? No, he said. Oh, did you look at and he was so I don't oh yeah. Some people go way out of their way to do a lot of stuff. I'm going to get you reading average
So there's a pointer out here. If you want a microphone, nobody's used it.
Sounds like nobody's used it,
Yeah, carried
stay away from that.
So Amanda's gonna.
Okay, so I won't.
Then I love.
Hey, welcome back to afternoon session.
just going to review for presenters. In 5 minutes towards the end of your talk, I'll put a little 5 up for you, and then 2 minutes, I'll stand up, and then hopefully we'll be able to wrap up and leave some time for questions. So we're going to start off this afternoon with Laura Jackson talking about a professional master's degree program in ecosystem management.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the presenters of this symposium today. I think it's just been a wonderful idea to get everyone together here who are interested in conservation biology. And I hope you guys can do it again. I know it's a lot of work. My co-author here is Dr. Mark Myers, who's a new member of the faculty in the art biology department at University of Northern Iowa. And I encourage you all to get to know him, a tropical conservation biologist. My topic today has to do with this question of what training do conservation biologists need to effectively do their job. And I want to start out by saying I'm not here to try to recruit current graduate students from ISU to come to UNI. I wouldn't be robbing the pews here on purpose anyway. But if you know someone who's an undergraduate and looking at different kind of a graduate program, you might encourage them to come and talk to us. I began my career after graduate school at the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix, and this is where I got my first lesson in conservation biology. The project that I was hired on to do was to look at the populations of saguaros, saguaro cacti, in their urban parks, particularly Papago Park, which is surrounded by Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale, etc. And these giant saguaros were in decline. Clearly, large individuals were dying early. They were killed by rabbits who browsed all around their bases, and they also were subject to some enormous amounts of soil erosion. And also, we saw no new recruitment of young individuals. And my job was supposed to do some ecological restoration of these desert environments. And as we looked at the situation in the parks, we found a great overpopulation of rabbits, jackrabbits, and we also had a lot of urban traffic, not just mountain bike traffic, but also walkers and hikers and horseback riders that had been doing this in these urban parks for a very long time. And so, having been trained as an ecologist, clearly the answer is you've got to control rabbits, either through clubbing or some other suitable method, and you also have to control human traffic, because to get at the root of this problem with the giant saguaros and the vegetation in general, you've got to go to the root of the biological problem. So I just went on over to the Parks and Rec department and sat there in a meeting and explained what needed to be done. Guess what happened? Flatly turned down. Of course, no, you're not going to go killing bunnies, and no, we're not going to restrict any human traffic in the parks whatsoever. These are their parks. Okay, so I went back to my boss and I said, well, I just can't do this. He didn't like that very much at all. Having written a dissertation on life history evolution in perennial grasses, I was unprepared for the job that I had come there to do, which was really to interact with those Parks and Rec people and come up with a solution. So at UNI, we've been pondering this question of what do conservation biologists really need to work, not necessarily in a research function in an academic institution, but at a number of state agencies and nonprofits. And so we went out and asked folks in mid-career in these different organizations what they thought was important in graduate training, or what was important in their job. And some of the answers: ability to work with people of diverse values and motivations. Social and economic issues surrounding conservation and management practices. Understanding public policy and being able to analyze it. Clearly, I was not prepared for the politics in Phoenix. Negotiation, being part of the public meetings process. All these kinds of skills that could have served me well if I had them. So in retrospect, these answers certainly made sense to me. A number of other things came up. management, managing people, managing budgets, managing projects, leadership skills, being effective in your organization, good knowledge of environmental law, budgeting, accounting, writing grants, obviously. You get that as a graduate student. Public relations and marketing, depending on the organization that you're in. Ooh, I don't know what happened there. There's also some literature on graduate education in conservation biology. I've been looking through old issues of the journal Conservation Biology, and a number of authors have suggested that because of the interdisciplinary nature of conservation biology, that there are some topics that are just essential for becoming effective to protect endangered species and habitats. And this is just a short list of some of the recent things in the last 10 years. There is a very strong program at University of Maryland and also at the American University, both in DC, and they all emphasize practical projects that are defined by clients and that involve a sort of a group or a team approach. That's one quick way to summarize it. Ecosystem management has been variously defined, but I like this definition of managing land for biological diversity and ecosystem health in a social and economic context. And boy, in Iowa, are we ever in a social and economic context. The managing land part obviously involves things like fire and brush control and invasive species removal. But then there is the whole social and economic context, which is much more of a political science, environmental economics type of a framework. And about the time that I was learning about these things, there were a group of people at University of Northern Iowa in other sciences that were exploring the possibility of developing a new kind of a master's program called a professional science master's, which is oriented towards moving scientists into industry, government, and nonprofit straight as a master's program without going through the PhD and the rigors and the real rigors of a research-oriented graduate program. And most of these programs are in biotechnology. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the idea is advanced science plus business and workplace skills, interdisciplinary types of fields like conservation biology, the use of a team project defined by an outside client outside of the university, and a program that's developed in concert with potential employers. Usually there's an internship involved. And industrial math, biotechnology, bioinformatics are examples of programs across the country that have developed professional science master's programs. Usually they use words like global competitiveness and that kind of thing, which I don't really care about. But clearly in conservation biology, there's some call for this sort of interdisciplinary project-based approach. And so we're going to give this a shot. University of Northern Iowa is developing a professional science master's in ecosystem management. And here are some of the components. It's a 30-credit, one-year intensive program starting next fall. There are 8 credits of electives. Each cohort of students is going to complete probably 2, perhaps more projects defined by clients, and I'll talk about one of those projects in a moment. There is a seminar, and they are all required to do an internship, hopefully with somebody who will employ them soon after that internship, and that's the idea. So here's an example of a group project that we're developing for our students for next fall. It's the Cedar Island Wildlife Area in Black Hawk County, and it's owned by the Black Hawk County Conservation Board. In the 1930s, it looked like this. It's sort of I don't know what you would call it, not an oxbow system, but it's clearly a portion of the Cedar River, and it's a swamp. It floods. There are a lot of areas that are flooded or that are channeled part of the year. And in the 1930s, it was scattered trees. Today, it looks like this. There's an island of cedar trees here. I guess I can't point at that, can I? There's an island of cedar trees in the middle, and quite a bit of grassland. There's the cedars, and there's quite a bit of grassland in here. There's scattered oaks throughout, but it's also very dense with a lot of vegetation. And this was purchased by the county a few years ago. And it very closely resembles, especially in geomorphology and from the air, the Nature Conservancy's Swamp White Oak Preserve further south along the Cedar River, which is considered a globally threatened type of a plant community. And so we're very curious, and the county is very curious to know whether there are some areas of significant natural communities in this area, and if so, what kind of management they should undergo to protect those savanna systems. So we will be doing several things with our students, teaching them how to do species inventories from a wide variety of organisms. Some of the conventional methods of vegetation management, brush control, prescribed fire, invasive species control, monitoring, and we want to do this in an adaptive management context so that there's data collected and experimental designs and controls in place in a more scientific way. We'll be teaching them methods of conservation planning and design with the GIS and GPS and making pretty maps and so forth. And really at the heart of this, though, is a much thornier problem. And that is that the County Conservation Board system traditionally, and this is in most counties in the state, not all for sure, is very heavily defined by the major user groups who are people who have RVs and want to go out and camp and have a nice hookup there. They're also sportsmen, people who hunt pheasant or deer and so forth, and duck. And those constituencies have not been interested at all in biological diversity of plants and animals. They appreciate the wild lands, they appreciate being able to hike and so forth, but it is not, it's not a group that's really cared about biodiversity in the sense that the people in this room care about biodiversity. And the funding for county programs has not been very good when it comes to managing land for biological diversity. So finding funding, finding staff, even finding volunteer support for the management of county lands for something besides hunting and fishing is going to be difficult. And what we really expect our students to do is to confront this sort of thorny question of how we bring along the County Conservation Board system and make it a system that also respects and honors its role in protecting biodiversity. So real quickly, just a couple of things that we have going for us. I'll just kind of skip this. At UNI, we do have this Tallgrass Prairie Center, which has been very important in prairie restoration types of things around the state. Continues to be active in seed production plots and vegetation management and developing new techniques. So they're very helpful to us. We've also made a lot of contacts with local government entities like the county and the city, even UNI, state and federal agencies, especially the State Preserves Advisory Board, which I'm sure will help us in the future, and private businesses that are involved in consulting with local landowners. I think that's really the future, as well as conservation NGOs. So, wish us luck. That's all I ask. It's a different kind of an animal, you know. It's not a PhD program. Or yes.
What sort of coursework